Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Gaming. You returned to your hometown only yesterday, and already you know there's something amiss. You were supposed to be meeting your friend Alice at the train station, and she never showed. Well, that's not unusual in itself. Alice has always been a little... If you want to be generous, you'd call her mercurial. If you were feeling a little more harsh, you would say flaky. Let's go for mercurial, because you've always been friends with her. You know that she has a lot of things going on in her life. But you left a message. You called. You left another message. You spoke to her brother. Not only has she not responded, no one seems to know where she is. And it doesn't seem anyone else is really worried. So, you set up a group chat with some of your friends, old friends from town. You've not seen most of them since you moved away for the summer, but it seems no one knows where Alice is, and everyone has their own reason to be worried. One of you, it seems her best friend since your departing, Dakota, she says that Alice hooked up with a guy, Ryan. Didn't seem to go very well. Apparently ended on bad terms, and not long before you got back. Her brother tells you that she was getting in a lot of trouble with one of the teachers at school, Mr. Halvard, and apparently was seen with Mr. Halvard, about 30 years her senior, out at the lighthouse on the outskirts of town about a day before she went missing. And then there's Bria. Oh, you've heard of Bria before. You remember Bria from when you were at school. One hell of a school bully, and when I say hell, I mean it was like she has diabolism running through her veins. She was the kind of bully that wouldn't just dress you down verbally and humiliate you in front of class. She would beat you until you were bloody, and yet was never excluded from school. Well, rumour has it, so you're told now that you've set up this group chat, that apparently she was going around on social media a week ago saying, "That's it. I'm done with this Alice bitch. Next time I see her, she's dead." So you've returned home. Alice is missing. And it seems there's a lot of possible reasons for why. You are worried. Your friends are worried. And before the cops get involved, you're going to find out exactly why Alice is missing. Now let's talk about our game, shall we? Let's talk about Alice is Missing. Alice is Missing is a very innovative role-playing game. You've probably heard of it at this point. It's been around for a few years. I think it came out in 2020. And I was one of the backers of the Kickstarter. I haven't really been doing reviews of RPGs since that time, so this is why I'm only just getting around to it. But I've played Alice is Missing a fair few times now, and so I've developed some pretty strong impressions of this game. First things first, this is not a traditional RPG where you build a character sheet and you roll dice to determine outcomes. There are some instances in the game where you're going to need to flip a coin to see what the outcome of a certain event is, but for the most part it is a tight one-shot where you will narrate with the rest of the players what is occurring. And you will have prompts that appear during the course of the game that are going to push you in certain directions. But ultimately, the story you tell is between you and the rest of the players. There's no GM. But here's the catch. Here's what makes it interesting, and also, I think, to some people, off-putting. Alice is Missing is a game played in silence. Alice is Missing is a game played by text, by Messenger, by Discord group, or on the digital version via the platform that alicesmissing.com provides you. That may, as I say, sound off-putting, because for a lot of people, RPGs, the whole idea behind them is that you are speaking to each other, where you can still communicate out of character. You can still talk as players, and indeed you can comment on what's going on. And I'm not evangelical about the idea of you have to maintain a monastic silence for the entire thing. If anything, I would suggest that in a game like this, being able to vent your thoughts is actually quite healthy and useful. But your mileage may vary, and your experience with Alice is Missing may dictate that the silence is preferable to being able to chat while your characters are talking in text. So let's talk about why they're talking in text, first of all. When in Alice is Missing, you are a group of teens who lived within the orbit of the missing Alice. Here's Alice Briarwood, missing poster for her, and of which there are several. And Alice is missing, as the title indicates, and all of you are worried. You have set up this group chat, and you are basically discussing where she is, where she's gone. The game runs from about, after you've done all the setup, it probably takes about 1.5 hours to 3 hours maximum. 3 hours, I'd say, if you include the cool off as well, because it helps to talk about this game after. And after you've all assigned characters, and you assign the relationships your characters have with each other, and your relationships with Alice, you all record voicemails that you left for Alice, and you don't let anyone else hear them until the very end of the game. You then start chatting. A timer starts. And the first question is going to be, does anyone know where Alice is? There's a prescribed message that starts the chain off. Now, at first, you're just going to be bantering back and forth, and the way I recommend people play this at first is to not have your characters immediately in a panic. I think if you drive straight away to 90 miles per hour, you're going to lose momentum as the game goes on. As role players, your best bet is to play this game as if your characters are first learning that Alice is missing and first becoming worried, but occasionally taking that conversation to less urgent matters, like, hey, how have you been since we last caught up? Because you are playing teens. Yes, you're worried about Alice, but right now she is not a cause for emergency. That occurs as the game goes on, because at the 80-minute mark, let's say, you will draw a card. If it's the digital version, it will pop up automatically. And on that card, here's the one I've got, you reveal a suspect card. Now, before the game starts, you have 5 suspects and 5 locations. And you, the players, have to assign each suspect to a location, say why they are linked, and what relationship that person and that location together had with Alice. So now, at this point, the person with the 80 in front of them, or the person for whom it pops up on the digital version, will draw one of the suspects from the deck and add to the chat, I remember Alice finding something out that was dark about this person's past. What bad or scary thing about this person did she uncover? Now, the player shouldn't, and this is me dictating my experience of Alice is Missing, they shouldn't immediately go in just to say, do you remember Mr. Halvert? He once offered Alice an A grade if she agreed to sleep with him. Because that comes out of nowhere. Rather, as role players, what you're trying to do is lay the groundwork, because it's at first every 10 minutes one of these prompts comes up, and 10 minutes can take quite a long time if you, I guess, blow the lead immediately. So what you actually want to do is say something like, do you think Mr. Halvert might know where Alice is? At which point one of the other players will naturally ask, why would Mr. Halvert know where Alice is? At which point you will respond, didn't any of you hear that rumour before I left for summer? What rumour? There was a rumour going around school that Mr. Halvert was offering an A grade to some of the girls. What do you mean? Give us more details. I and other people are at this point going to be suspecting things about Mr. Halvert. Now, as a player, what you should be doing here, and this is what all of the players should be doing, is feeding ideas into each other and responding, reacting to the responses you're getting from the other players. So someone may come back to say, yeah, he was offering A grades to girls. I know this because he offered one to me if I brought in drugs for him, or if I kept his drinking secret a secret. You see, other players can come up with ideas that you have not. So this is the whole point of drip feeding things rather than going, whoa, right away, he's sleeping with students in exchange for A grades. At various points in the game, like let's say at 70 minutes, so it counts down from 90. At the 70 mark, you go and draw a location. And that question may be something like, someone saw Alice here the day before she disappeared, or you saw her here the day before she disappeared. Now introduce that into the subject. And so you get these prompts as the game goes on and you're typing about them, and then the time becomes more and more compressed with the prompts. You will start moving on from suspects and locations to actual events that are occurring. Now, just because I've shown you this doesn't mean that is going to be your 80-minute card. In the core game set, you have 3 variants of each card, and in the expansion, which I think is only about $10, at least the digital version, you've got even more cards that could pop up. So there's a lot of variety in this game. And as the game proceeds and you're getting closer and closer to 0, you're getting closer and closer to finding out where Alice is. Now, part of that is defined based on what gets turned over on the cards, but a lot of it is contextualized by the story you come up with as players. As I say, there's no dice rolling. There is the occasional flipping of a coin. You may get a card that says, don't type anything for 2 minutes because your character is occupied right now. Let's say you visited a location. So your character is occupied. Don't type anything for 2 minutes. At the end of that 2 minutes, flip a coin. If it's heads, your character has been injured. If it's tails, your character has got away. And I'm not going to provide any more information than that because I don't want to ruin all of the possibilities. But there are lots of things that could have happened to Alice. They're not all fatal. They're not even all bleak or miserable. But I would suggest that if you're familiar with plots like I mentioned in the previous video, Twin Peaks, Laura Palmer and so on, if you're familiar with video games like Life is Strange, you'll be aware of the kind of things that may be taking place in this quiet little town. And when I say maybe, it's because it's entirely up to you, the players, to define what has been going on. I have really found Alice is Missing a very refreshing take on role-playing games. It is something that is specific for a one-shot, and I like that as well. I like a game you can just introduce and get playing immediately without being bogged down and having to learn new rules. It's also quite an emotionally impactful, if that's a word, RPG, because the story you tell is going to be as bleak or as hopeful, as depressing, I suppose, as you choose for it to be. There's a heavy emphasis in Alice is Missing on lines and veils, on X cards, on the idea of using safety guidelines, because it is quite easy when talking about a teenage girl disappearing to venture into some very dark territory. I recommend venturing into that dark territory if your group is comfortable to do so, because I think you're going to get the most out of the game that way. Now, you don't have to, and it all ultimately depends on everyone's tastes and comfort levels, but I've got the most out of this game personally when the players have all basically agreed on, well, what they're comfortable with, and when that comfort level is pretty broad. That's going to differ for every single group, and so that's absolutely fair enough, but that's my experience. My experience also on this game in recommending it to people and how to play it, as I say, do not charge right in with immediate panic. This game, at the very minimum, lasts 90 minutes. And if you first start off with character saying, I'm going to the lighthouse to look for Alice, and another one says, I'm going to the Dripping Dagger nightclub to look for Alice, and so forth, you're going to get to the end of that first 10 minutes. No one's going to have found Alice, because it's impossible to find Alice in the first 10 minutes. And at that point, your characters are not going to have much justification for what they're doing or why they are doing it, in my view. Now, there is a helpful bit that you can add to your Alice is Missing games. If you are struggling for inspiration, there are cards which, in the hard game, are a fellow with a flashlight. They're basically free prompts you can take at any point if you need assistance. They look like this. And they will be something like, you will type into the chat where your character is headed. In the digital version, you can just click on a location, but you should always tell others where you are going. And you will head there. You will give it some time, because remember, you're role-playing. You're not just going to be jumping straight into what happens next. So you get to where you're going, and once you get there, you are going to type something like, OMG, I just found something, it might be terrible. At which point, the other players are going to say, shit, what? What did you find? Talk to us, whatever your name is. At which point, you are going to flip one of these cards or click the magnifying glass symbol on the digital version, and it will be something like drops of blood in the snow. Now, how you incorporate that into your storytelling is, as ever, entirely up to you. I don't recommend pulling too many of those cards when you're playing the game, clicking the magnifying glass too much. Rely on the other players a bit more, use your own imagination a bit more, and the reason I say that is this. Eventually, as the game reaches its conclusion in the last 40 minutes or so, you are going to get some more defined answers for where Alice is and who the culprit is, whether it's someone who she slept with, who's attacked her, who's whatever's happened. And at that point, you may have introduced so many additional MacGuffins with your magnifying glass clicking that they will serve absolutely no purpose to be added to the game. As an example, I ran a game, I organised a game of Alice is Missing not that long ago, and we only used one of those cards, and I think we got drops of blood in the snow. And this was really good, because we could talk about, it may not have been Alice, it could have been a deer got injured or something like that, or maybe someone had a nosebleed, you don't know, and then one of us goes, oh shit, I'm kicking through the snow, I think if this was a crime scene, I've completely disturbed it, fuck, and so on. And it became an entire talking point, but it didn't become the crux of the plot. I did another Alice is Missing where we churned through a good 6 of them, and we got something like 3 scary masks that we found, a loaded gun, a broken switchblade, and drops in the snow. And at that point, unless there's a heist taking place somewhere in town, those things didn't actually add to the plot, they just detracted from it. So I suggest using caution, using those prompts that exist to help you. You can use them if you need to, but try to lean on your own creativity to get the most out of the game. So, with all that said, would I recommend Alice is Missing? Definitely. I think for the right kind of group, it's going to be a great deal of fun. But do be cautious, because this is a game that, for one thing, is a one-shot game, so if you're only interested in campaign-length games, you may not want it. And 2, ensure that you, if you have a regular gaming group that plays together, have a group that is going to actually enjoy a game like this. It's very narrative-heavy. It requires a lot of people coming up with ideas on the fly, so people need to be able to improv, and of course be comfortable with the conceit of messaging each other their roleplay. It is a text roleplay, but you can all be sat in the same room, which I know sounds utterly strange if you're an in-person roleplayer, that you're all sat in the same room and just messaging each other. I promise that once you've got the music on, because there's accompanying music for Alice is Missing, and you are all sat there and you start getting in the zone, you have these cards in front of you and you're flipping them over at the right prompt points, you will find yourself dragged in to the game of Alice is Missing. All of a sudden, it will not feel awkward. I guarantee it. So give it a go. As always, my reviews are reviews, because I'm never going to talk about a game I think is bad. I mean, that's not the point of this channel. It's the Gentleman's Guide because I like to talk about things in a kind and generous way. So I recommend it, I like it, and you should give it a go if you want to try a very different kind of RPG. It's Alice is Missing by Hunters Entertainment, and I think you will enjoy it if you are like me. Alright, speak to you again soon.